What's up guys, Houndish here, jumping in with some Destiny 2 news. And there is a little bit of Destiny 2 news. It's news about news, but it relates to Shadow and Order. Apparently Bungie now have a confirmed release date for this, because up until this point, they apparently hadn't decided on one, which is wild. So we have some new leaks. Apparently Bungie are going to explain themselves in the very near future. I'll touch on what that means in a moment. Otherwise, we also have community vibes. We'll talk about how players are feeling, some funny stories from the week, memery, free loot, and more. If you enjoy it, a rating really helps us out below. But now let's get into it. Up first today, following a twid this week which once again had no real revelations about the future of the game, Paul Tassi has now reported that Shadow and Order is apparently internally confirmed to be releasing in May. So once again, this is according to sources that he knows inside of Bungie. He says, "I reported that the coming Destiny 2 Shadow and Order major update would be delayed from its March 3rd release, in part due to the release of Marathon. Then I confirmed that some data mining had extended that calendar a long while after that. Now though, my latest update is that sources tell me it is internally confirmed that Shadow and Order will be delayed until May, although he adds he doesn't know the specific date in May and that the update may be getting finalised." And these next parts are not confirmed, but he says he believes the roadmap will be revealed sometime between now and what would have to be Tuesday, February 24th. This will be when the delay is actually announced, and he adds that the sources have told him there will be an explanation about what's going on here and why the delay actually is happening. Plus he touches on the indications that that could mean the Shattered Cycle DLC, the next expansion, will also be delayed by at least a couple of months, right? So it could be that we're looking at late summer or fall before we get to that. I guess the minor positive that we can take out of this is that it seems Bungie have actually now landed on a release schedule, because last time Paul Tassi spoke about this a few days ago, it said they didn't actually have a specific planned release date yet, which is obviously pretty wild. Either way, the strong belief is that Bungie will have to talk about this in the next couple of weeks, at least before the date that's currently on the roadmap of March 3rd. And when it does drop, reportedly, it will contain some kind of an explanation regarding the game more broadly in terms of dev commentary. So that's the update, and obviously we certainly hope that we do indeed get this info from Bungie in the next couple of weeks. Otherwise, quick mention, something I missed in the twid here, but Bungie did actually hide an emblem code in there. That's for the runner emblem you can see on screen. This is for Destiny 2, obviously. So if you want to grab that, I'll link the redeem page and the code down below. In connection to Shadow and Order, if you remember back when Renegades dropped, Bungie had actually given us kind of a flavor text description of what Shadow and Order was supposed to be. They later replaced it with a generic description for Renegades, so we can only assume that this was an accidental early preview of some of the content that will actually feature in Shadow and Order when it drops. So we need to race the Dredgen and their outlaw mercenaries to a weapon of shadowy legend, storm a Hive weapons foundry, and prevent the Dredgen from expanding their corrupted arsenal. And that means there are a few interesting components to kind of pick at, I suppose. The weapon of shadowy legend is certainly an interesting one. The fact that it references it as a kind of legendary weapon in terms of, its backstory or history. The assumption is that it would be kind of recognizable to Destiny players. So maybe it's that Bungie are going to bring something back from Destiny 1 or something like that. Could be an exotic quest like what we saw in Ash and Iron, although I don't believe an exotic mission is actually confirmed for Shadow and Order specifically. But a Hive weapons foundry could indicate the kind of activity we might actually see as a kind of core activity update. We got Reclaim back in Ash and Iron. Hopefully this will be much better. And whether the delays that we've heard about for Shadow and Order will actually influence the quality of the content, we'll just have to wait and see. And there have been a few references to Dredgens in general in relation to Shadow and Order and the content that we've had since Renegades. So apparently the Dredgen organization as a whole is coming back into the picture. That's according to Colony Deeks, who kind of leaked some early info about it. And Bungie had also said themselves that Dredgen Bale will return in future Destiny 2 stories. It's a character we want to take with us outside of Renegades, and we're going to see him again, so that's kind of interesting. They'd also said around this time that they don't currently plan to do any more kind of crossover DLCs or anything like that, so obviously Dredgen Bale is going to factor into Destiny 2 as a key character moving forward, which is pretty interesting. On the community side, some discussion here. Someone said if Shadow and Order is going to be the same size in terms of content as Ash and Iron, then they could release it early and have extended Arms Week or Iron Banner. Of course, it likely is a similar size to Ash and Iron, but quality is also important, right? Quality was probably the biggest issue for Ash and Iron in particular. Bear in mind these are free updates. I'm not really sure what's going on with the live services for Destiny and why we're not seeing things like Iron Banner come up more frequently, but obviously Bungie are putting a lot of resources at this precise moment into Marathon. On the subject of Marathon. Sony says it's very confident about Marathon after recent playtests, player feedback, and the changes that Bungie have made. As for Marathon, it had user tests and then from the users feedback for the game on what were the good and not so good points, so that kind of feedback we've taken into consideration and we've made modifications to it. So this time around, after those updates, we are very confident to release it on March 5th. That's the CFO of Sony. And obviously they're going to kind of portray confidence in these products because it infects their investors and the company at large. When we go back in time a little bit, obviously Sony's words about Bungie and their concerns around the IP were a little bit harsher. Either way, Sony are demonstrating that they generally have more confidence in things at this precise moment in time. But for any of us who are curious how this is going to play out, we certainly don't have long to wait given that Marathon drops in 1 month, and between now and then, we will see the open playtest as well. Further on the conversation about Destiny though, there's a big popular thread here. There are not enough players on LFG anymore. It's reset night and I'm still not able to find a group to do Desert Perpetual, the newest raid in the game. And I would say, based on my experience, that LFG for raids and dungeons in particular have been hit really hard, given the lack of support that content has generally had since the launch of Edge of Fate, right? There were already kind of the pieces of content that were more likely to marginalize certain parts of the community who are either more casual or maybe play solo and all that kind of stuff. And then with the introduction of the feat system, contest raids and dungeons, which are incredibly hard, I think it has kind of served to alienate more of the community than it already had. And on top of that, when you've got the kind of player-based decline in general, it does compound that issue. So this is affecting raid and dungeon content more heavily, especially raid content. But equally, with a lower population, you will see that bleed into other types of things as well, whether it's Grandmasters or whatever else you may use LFG for. So it's an unfortunate side effect of where we're currently at. On the subject of the double invasions that we've had this week in the Lawless Frontier, a lot of the time, they work fairly flawlessly, but as some folks have said here, double invasions does not always warn you when a second invader actually comes. So basically the first invasion will have the pop-up on screen and notify you about it, but in a lot of instances, the second invasion won't actually notify players, and basically another Guardian will just walk up behind you while you're completely engaged with PvE enemies and shoot you in the back of the head or whatever, which is kind of hilarious, but also very frustrating if you're not expecting it, I suppose. I haven't personally encountered that, but to be fair, I've only done a few runs of the Lawless Frontier this week. In other news, which is kind of a conversation you could have about Destiny as well, Overwatch 2 apparently is no more, and Blizzard have said they're renaming the game back to simply Overwatch, starting with the next season on February 10th. So they're dropping the 2. I remember there was an interview with Luke Smith about whether they'd do something like this for Destiny. And assuming that Destiny has the kind of future where Bungie plan to drop a lot more content and support it in general, aside from a Destiny 3, this kind of bleeds into the conversation about a Destiny Classic concept where perhaps Bungie could actually drop the number entirely, go back to calling the game Destiny. I'm not saying that in itself would save the game, but it's another possibility in terms of supporting the franchise moving forward if Bungie were also able to, I don't know, update a bunch of stuff from Destiny 1, redesign a load of systems in the game, presumably, yeah, get rid of the portal. They could essentially do something similar to this. Division 1 also recently pushed a 60 FPS update to that game after 10 years, and players have said they'd love to see that done for Destiny 1 as well. I'd be surprised if Bungie actually did any specific update for Destiny 1, but they could certainly do a larger scale update for both of those games, bring over more of the content from D1 that we don't have, as well as system reworks for Destiny 2, but I don't know whether that's realistic at this precise point in time. Next up, coming up in February, Bungie will once again celebrate Chinese New Year. There'll be a silver bundle with some cosmetics in the Eververse store. They also have a tendency to release emblems, so we can see the Year of the Snake and Rebirth emblems right here. And the codes for those are on screen as well, so if you don't have them and you fancy them, you can always go to bungie.net/redeem. I'll link that down below with the codes, in case you want to grab them. And as we've discussed a couple of times recently, Bungie will also be updating the Eververse store to feature some Crimson Days items over the period around Valentine's Day, so a couple of cosmetic updates coming up in the very near future. On the subject of the director for Destiny, bulletin shared here from Maximilian Locke, a redesigned fan-made version of what the portal or the director itself could actually look like right here, which is cool. I do enjoy seeing these mock-ups of how Bungie could do things differently, at least in the UI. And concepts like this in particular certainly demonstrate just how good the director can actually look. It kind of just demonstrates as well on a thematic level, it just feels so much better than the portal. There's a cool clip here. Apparently a sword can be parried by a glaive right there, which is absolutely bonkers. It reminds me of the time that I parried a thunder crash on the end of my Praxic blade, which was pretty fun. Classy Octopod on Reddit also shared, the big bowl in Savathun's throne world is bugged. So this is what you can see up close. When you're actually in a distant load zone, it looks like it normally should, but as you get closer to it, another bug being documented here, but basically all different parts of the geometry around the Court of Thorns is actually broken up and all just kind of floating in places where it shouldn't be, which is pretty bonkers. An interesting thing here, upcoming content was added to the memento section right here of the collection, so we can see all the classic kind of mementos and resources. And after a recent update, it appears something else is sitting in there. Who knows what it is though, we just have pure speculation getting into that. Apparently the Dark Age Hunt saw 71% of all runs being completed on a Warlock, the class with a literal bow buffing super, as the lowest clear rate, as Softlight points out right here. So Warlocks had 23,000 clears, Titans with 5,500 clears nearly, and Hunters with a little over 4,000 clears. Obviously Warlocks are strong and folks do tend to gravitate towards them when they think about doing solo runs and stuff like that, so it's not massively surprising. Although, especially with the Praxic Blade and things we have right now, even kind of a Bayant Leap Strand Titans with Praxic Blade. With the right armor set, it's kind of just free, it's easy mode. But despite that, psychologically, players will always kind of revert to the thing they know works very well, which of course is the Warlock in this kind of instance. Vinic City shared a funny clip right here, where jolting feedback, is actually causing this hologram body to flail around on the floor when it sparks. It's almost like it's reanimating it, which is sort of amusing. And on Reddit, folks are discussing whether players still have their Archie trinkets, the various collectibles from that Where is Archie quest we had back in the day. Of course, we had the sad news this week that the dog, Artemis, who inspired Archie, unfortunately passed away after kind of a distressing incident. So folks have been celebrating Archie and Artemis through the game, as well as using the loyal companion emote. So if you feel like doing that, it at the very least shows a little bit of support. And if you want to hear more on what that story is about, I'll link a video discussing it down below. For today, that is what we have to round up in this video, so share your thoughts, feelings on Destiny 2, feelings on how Bungie are handling things at the moment, speculation about Marathon or indeed the future of both of the IPs that Bungie are now trying to support. It's going to be a very interesting couple of months, as I've said numerous times, but also if you enjoyed the video, a rating would very much help us out, and if you want to stay up to date with more Destiny content, feel free to hit subscribe, but otherwise, cheers for tuning in, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.